Hello everyone, and welcome to Unicast, the University Podcast. I'm your host of this miniseries, Flux, a student of science and computer science at the University of New Brunswick. And welcome back. It's actually been a while since I last recorded one of these episodes. Just for reference, this is actually February the 3rd of 2019, and my last recording was about late November 2018, so it's been a long time since I've done one of these. So if there's any slip-ups or any mistakes that I make while just doing my standard speaking during this episode, just chalk it up to me really not being familiar with this and being a little bit out of practice. So, this week we're going to be discussing a bit on budgeting and a bit on traveling in university. Now, from my experience of trying to record this episode in the past, this might not actually take as long as I thought it would, so I might take some time near the end to just talk about general things at university and some things that I missed over some previous episodes. So, without further ado, let's begin. We begin today by talking a little bit about budgeting. Now, I have under good intention that everyone watching this has a good idea of what traveling is and about how to go about it, so we're not going to go into that here. We're just going to jump right into that after we talk about budgeting. But I know budgeting is a bit more of this gray space for many students and especially many people entering university. A lot of people go around saying, make sure you have a balanced budget, make sure you know what you're doing with this amount of money and that amount of money, and make sure you're putting 15 to 25% of it all into your savings, and that you have enough money to pay off your bills, and that you're doing this, that, and another thing. And while all these are in good intention, they miss the point that no one teaches budgeting to students. High school very much ignores it. Most parents are quite bad at teaching it, and if you don't have a natural inclination of how to deal with your money, you're kind of fresh out of luck in many of our school systems. And it's even worse that most students are dealing with crippling debt, massive loans, and still barely have enough money to afford anything except ramen or time to cook anything except ramen. So there is this bit of disconnect and issue that budgeting seems like this very difficult, very large thing that most people can not really achieve in university, especially going into it with having probably no income in high school, maybe like a part-time job, to having still no income in university and doing about the same thing, but now without any parents to pay your way. So we're going to take the time to really discuss what budgeting is and how to go about it, and that's going to take up the bulk of this episode. Now, as a beginning definition, it's good to say exactly what we mean when we say budgeting, and especially in this episode, because I know that a bit of fancy defining goes around, and a lot of people like to use their own ways of meaning it. For our purposes, budgeting just means assigning we're assigning a sum of money to a specific purpose and making sure it is used solely to fulfill that purpose. Now, this purpose could range anywhere from bill payments that have to be made or you'll lose some service, to simply maybe your afternoon snack. Or maybe your, I don't know, that one fancy fragrance, I can't think of any words today, perfume that you really like to have. That's the word I was looking for. So budgeting just refers to assigning money to these things. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what is good about budgeting and why should we budget when we're in university, and is there any worth to it? Now, this falls under the same issue as before, where it's never really taught that budgeting is a really important, really good thing. People just keep telling you to do it without telling you here's why you should do it, and here's situations where you shouldn't do it, and here's where it's going too far, and here's where it's not going too far, and all the such. So it might seem difficult to reason why you have to have a budget in the first place. But simply, if you don't know where your money is going, or what you want to do with your money, there's a full possibility that you're going to end up spending your money on something you didn't mean to buy, or something that you didn't really think out, or something that you actually couldn't afford, but you didn't realize you could afford yet. So the reason to budget is to exactly avoid these things. If you don't have a really big balanced budget, you've probably run into a situation where you bought something, looked at your bank account, and realized, oh man, I should not have bought that thing. Even I've run into that, and I do run a balanced budget. So there's a lot of incentive to budget to make sure that you don't accidentally make a spontaneous purchase that you can't handle, or that you don't put money into the wrong locations. And with this, there is still the confusion of how to budget in the first place. Sure, maybe you've already have been able to reason, here's why you should budget, here are the reasons, here are all the great things about budgeting that I've been told time and time again, but how do I do it? What makes sense about it? So we're going to go through the details of how to make a balanced budget, at least more the way I do it, and we're going to be doing so by actually going through my official budget with, more of the personal details left out, because I kind of should keep that personal. So I have my budget here on my phone, and I'm going to be looking at it throughout the duration of this episode. If you hear any long pauses during this section, it actually just means I'm looking at the budget and I've seen something that looks odd and I don't really know how to reason it with myself. In that situation, hopefully I've edited those moments out. If I haven't, though, that should give a good enough explanation for it. So we're going to go through the process of making your own budget now that we've talked a bit on why you should budget and what budgeting is. We'll talk a bit more about that after we talk about how to make a budget and all the benefits that you can see from it. But to do that, it's best we talk about how do you create your budget in the first place. So I do my budgets electronically. I personally don't like having them on a long sheet of paper. I prefer to do them in an Excel spreadsheet. Can you see yet that I'm a computer science major? Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like using Excel and don't like using spreadsheets and database software, but this is the best way to run your budget. And unless you don't trust your operating system or you don't trust the software you're using, it can be the most efficient and the least risky. Even so, everything I'm saying here does still apply to the traditional pen and paper method. Just make sure every time you edit your budget that you take a picture of it, so that if you ever lose the paper, you can just quickly jot it down again from the picture. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is losing all that information and have no way of getting it back. It is painful. It has happened to me with the old ways I used to budget on pen and paper, and it's really prone to mistakes as well. I made a $600 mistake in my first budget when first coming to university because I had it on paper and didn't database it. So yeah, take pictures, have backups, and check it over every few weeks. These things become messes. We'll talk a bit more about that later. So when it comes to making a balanced budget, the best thing you can do for yourself is make sure that you are organized. A messy budget is not going to do you well. So we're going to be going about how to make an organized budget specifically. So let's say you opened spreadsheet software or you drew out a big table on your piece of paper. What do you do now? Well, you need a few sections on your table. Now, I would make these sections the columns going from top to bottom. You can do them however you wish, but this is, I find, the best way to organize. Now, these sections should be just enough for you to understand what's going on and nothing more. So the first column that I would make would be the name column. Now, this doesn't actually have to be a name. You can call it title, you can call it description. This is the item that you are budgeting for. This is what it is. So if you're ever looking for something very specific, all you have to do is look in the first column, find it, look at what you budgeted towards it, or how much you spent if you have a column like that. The second one, or the second column that I defined was called a class column. This is just, is this money I took in or is this money that went out? And that's entirely it. This just tells me, is this income or outgoing money? And it helps me calculate things in the end. Now, you can avoid doing this when you talk about the money, which is the next column. You could just make it positive or negative values. I find this helped me organize it. I recommend doing it. Not actually necessary, though. Now, the next column I titled price. This column could full well just be the monetary value that this item is going to take up. And this I did as positive numbers were income, negative numbers were outgoing. All I did was total up the money from this row, and that told me how much money was left. Then I had a few extra ones that are really good for Excel, not as important for paper, but I had the date column, which if you can't remember the date for it or you can't find the date for it, put this in there. It just makes it a lot easier to remember either when you budgeted it or when it was spent. I would make the date when you actually spent it. I have a column called future, which is just, is this a payment in the future? I have one called void, as is this no longer valid? And then I have some notes. Those are up to you if you want them. The most important one is, what is it? Is it income or outgoing money? And what is its value? Now, I always started with the amount of money that was in my account, my bank account, because this is a bank account budget for me specifically. How much money did I have in my bank account, or how much money did I have in general? I called this original. That was its name. Now, the class, if you remember, was in or out, is it income or outgoing money, was just in. This is money coming into my table to organize, not money leaving my table giving me a negative value. And then I had under the price column, or the value column, just the amount of money that was in my account at the time. Almost read that out by accident. So from there, there's actually nothing else in the table. So from there, the table at the end would just say 558.94, whatever you have as your monetary value. That the first number is not really important. That's going to change by a few thousand, probably throughout a month of this budget. So the next one, I just started going through putting in all the income that I made over a period of time. So this income could be something like money I got in from scholarship, money I took in from the work that I did, gifts from parents or family, or anything of the sort. For example, I do have a row called scholarship, and this is an in, and its value was the value of the scholarship. I didn't put a future because it's not a future payment. I didn't put a void, no month, no notes. It's relatively self-explanatory. Now, in my column, I actually put the name of the scholarship. That made it a lot easier for me to understand. You can call it scholarship. I also have some rows, I keep saying columns. I have a row called work, which is just money I made from work, and it works exactly the same as with the scholarship. Just work in value of the work. Done. Now, as you scroll through, you'll start to find that you needed to spend money. Now, taking in money all the time is really good, and I know we all love that feeling, but money coming in is just money coming in. It has to go out for money to have any actual value. So, I have a long series of outs that were just called extra, and I still don't know what they are. Don't do that. That is a mistake with my first budget. I'm actually going to have to scroll down significantly far to find something that is not titled extra, because I did that for 3 months, because I made this budget 3 months after I started actually needing the budget. So that was a bad idea. But anyway. So I'm just going to use the idea like when I had to buy computer monitors. When I moved to university, actually, my one computer monitor broke. I was completely unable to use it. So I had to buy 2 more. So I decided I need to spend approximately, now I did buy 2, so this might be different from what you'll do. I decided about $350 was about the range that I wanted to spend. So I have monitors, then I have out, and then I have minus 350. And then I went to the future column and wrote, honestly, I put the word future in the future column. You could just put yes, you could put a dash, you could put a star. Some note that this is not something that has happened yet. So you know that whatever value you reach at the end, if you ignore this, you'll get your current value. If you include it, you'll get the value after the payment. And how I worked with this was I looked at it and said, okay, how much money do I have now? I totaled everything that did not include this and did not have any future marks. And I was like, how much money will I have after I buy the monitors? So then I just added in the outgoing money for the monitors, which would be, in this case, minus 350. Just an estimate. Always aim to go lower than your estimate. Make sure your estimate's the highest value you can imagine it being that you will spend, because the worst thing you can do is under budget. The best thing you can do is over budget. It's quite simple as that. So I made the payment, and when I looked at when I actually did buy these monitors, I noticed they ended up costing more than I expected. I actually did end up going above the maximum value that I set. So to remedy this, I had to look at other areas of my budget that were in the future and lower things down until I fit the actual cost of the monitors. Now, this is a bit of a mistake on my part because I didn't budget to the maximum amount, but that was the maximum amount I was expecting at the time. And that's all anyone can reasonably do. Following this, everything goes into a similar pattern. I bought textbooks. One of my textbooks cost about $100. So what does it say? It says bio textbook, out, minus about $100. Now, I'm not going to put the actual amount in there. But yeah, so that's how that's written. I also have a column here called my textbook budget. And this simply is just the amount of money that I budgeted for the textbook. And there's a word here that I think we need to discuss. Void. Because this is not money that I'm expecting to spend unless I have to. I do not include it in calculations. Even so, it's still a number that I need to know, so I have the word void in there, because I don't plan on buying any more textbooks. Even so, if I wanted to keep assuming that I will be spending that money, I just wouldn't put the word void there. Void just tells me, don't include this in my calculations, because it's not money that's actually going to be spent anymore. It's just a note that I want to keep. I did this to a lot of payments that became invalid or that changed, but I needed to know the previous amount for. There's another column I have here that's very important like that, or sorry, another row, and that's my monthly left. Now, I budgeted about $150 a month while in university because I felt that was an appropriate amount. So I totaled that up for 8 months, which totals to, I think, $1,200, and then I put that in a column that I did not void out originally, called monthly left. Then, whenever I took money from that, I would change it to, let's say it hit January, and I was like, okay, $150 for January. So I'd take $150 out of my monthly left and put it into January budget. Everything was still the same, but now I knew how much was going to be left for future months and how much I had for this month. And this January budget one would change depending on purchases. So let's say in January, I spent $50. I would change January left to a minus 100, and then I would take this new thing that came in and make that minus 50. Same number, but it's easier to look at things. Now, I know this is a weird way of doing it, and some people won't like that. If you don't like how I did that, you don't have to do it. This is my way of organizing it best. I'll have color-coded columns, color-coded rows, my apologies, that just include the amount of money left for each individual month and for what's going on. If you find that is confusing or might mess up your organization, just don't do that. If you have a monthly budget, just maybe put a color next to it to say what month it's from, and make sure that doesn't go over. That's completely up to you. But as you follow this pattern, you'll notice that your table fills up more and more with all these different things you've bought that you're keeping track of. And by the end, you'll always be able to see how much money you have left and look at how much money you'll have left after a purchase and make sure that that money does go towards that purchase. Now, I fully recommend doing this monthly budget idea that you say, I will spend this much money this month maximum. You can always go under, but you'll never go over unless you need to. There's always an emergency situation that you have to be careful of. Even so, that can be its own fund called emergency if you want to. That's actually a good way of doing it. And I like doing it with having my monthly budget set up, as I said, but either way, have an idea for what you want to spend each month so you can take out of it without worrying that you're going over. Because if you know that every month you spend $50 on food, well, every time you hit the beginning of a month, just put in $50 there and take that out of how much is left in your month. Then you know how much money you have safe to spend without taking away from the amount of money you put into food. As you get used to this and as you do this more, you'll find that your budget, that it gets easier and easier to visualize how much money you have and how much you can spend, and to understand what you can and can't do with the money that you have. And I find in the end, this is actually really helpful. Recently, I made the spontaneous decision to buy a suit because with this budget, I was able to rationalize to myself to save money each month, to spend a little bit under my monthly budget. Then, when I got some gift money and some other money from other sources, I put it all towards a suit because I wanted a suit. And then, well, it didn't detract from my budget at all, and now I have a suit. I'm doing the same thing with a few other objects. I'm doing this with a new micro SD card for my phone. I'm doing this with a possible new hard drive for my computer, which I know are both kind of nerdy things, but they're things that I want and things that I need. And in that case, having my budget makes sure that I never spend more money than I can and that I can save up. And with a budget like this, you might say, I want to put this much money into savings. Well, you can make a row called savings and just make it a future row so that if things go a bit hairy, it's not in your savings, so you don't need to worry, but you can still write down that you have this much money saved up. That's actually how I did it in my table. Now, my table is only for my checking account. My savings is just kind of this lump sum of money I don't plan on spending until in the future, but that is what savings are for. And in the end, by using this table, I've been able to rationalize my money. And that's a very important thing when you're in university. We talked about this a little bit before we went through how to make your table, which I hope I made clear now, but even so, it'd be good to touch on it a little bit more before we switch to traveling. So when it comes to why you should budget, I tried to make it clear while talking about the budget itself and how to make it, but it has a lot of advantages, like saving you money. I know if I didn't have a budget, there'd be plenty of times I could say, I want this video game. How much money do I have? About this much. That's a lot of money. Let's buy the video game. Only to go look at my money in the future and start spending it on things I need and realize I don't have enough money to spend to pay this bill that month. Now, this is a hypothetical example. I've been budgeting for a long time, so this never really happened to me because I started budgeting before I had bills, which is I'm very thankful for. But this very well can happen. And before I was budgeting, this happened with more leisure purchases at times. Now, not too often, but it was an issue that I had where I was like, I have a lot of money without realizing I needed a lot of that money for future things and didn't actually have enough to go spending freely at the time. And it does cause a lot of issues when you're stuck doing this. So it's very important to make sure you know where your money is going so that when you want to buy something, you can make sure that you can buy it and that you have an idea on if you can do this or not. And if you can't, that's okay. You have this budget, you can rearrange it, you can put money into what you want and buy what you want while making sure you have enough money for other things. Now, I still can't stress some other importances and notes that we have to make when doing this budget. First, a budget is only as good as you make it. This is true for literally everything in life. You'll only get back how much effort you put in. If you quickly scrap together a budget that is not fully accurate or does not go into exact values, guess what you're not going to get back? Exact values. If you're not careful, your budget's not going to give you the correct numbers, and then by the end, when you actually do start spending money, you're going to wonder why your budget didn't help you in the first place. And don't come blaming me if you weren't careful with it. And always make sure you back up your budget. I mentioned this before, but it makes no sense for you to have a budget on a piece of paper and then have it possibly get lost, and then, well, what was the purpose of making the budget? It's gone now, right? Take pictures, make backups, scan it into your computer if you need to. I don't care how you do it. Have 2 copies at all times. One that remains in the same place at all times, and one that you can take with you. And even if you do this digitally, if you have multiple files, you don't know if your hard drive will crash. Save one to the cloud, or save it to another computer, to your phone. Google Drive if you want, if you trust Google. I really don't care. Have 2 copies, because if you lose one, you don't want to be fresh out of luck of a year's worth of budget. My budget here has been going for just about a year now. We're just running into that 1 year point. If I lost it now, I'm out. I am fresh out of luck. That will take months to fix, and that is months where I'll be completely disorganized. So budgets are great, but you end up depending on them a lot if you use them a lot. Don't waste this dependence. Take the time to back it up, even if you need to rewrite it on another sheet of paper. Take the time, and every time you change the budget, fix the backup. If there's no purpose in making it backup. If you then go change the first budget, maybe switch a few values around, add a few new things in, update it to be modern, and the backup's not updated. You lose the first sheet, and you wonder, why is my backup 2 months old? I wonder why. Right? Make sure it's backed up. Make sure you're careful. Make sure you're using exact values. And as a final piece of advice, don't go changing things wildly. If you have a budget, it doesn't make sense for you to say, I really want this. Can I afford it? I'll just take $50 off my $100 food budget. Well, you full well know if you don't have $100 in food, you don't have enough money to eat. Because in that case, your budget is doing nothing except what you want it to do, and it's not helping you in the slightest. Make sure that you do budget accordingly and listen to it. If you're breaking your budget, it's not going to work well. And look, I understand it's really hard to perfectly follow a budget at all times, and it's really hard to make sure that every purchase matches up. Sometimes you slip and you really want something and you can't stop yourself, and that's okay. There's no issue in making some errors with your budget and needing to fix it. As I said, when I first came to university, my budget was off by $600, and not in the good way. The good way being I spent $600 less than I thought. No, I budgeted $1,000. I spent $1,600 before coming to university. I had no idea that this happened, even though I was up to date on my budget, because it was on a sheet of paper and I was calculating it wrong. I completely didn't realize this, no matter how many times I double-checked the values back home, until I reached university. And then all of a sudden, I was fresh out of luck with the amount of money I had, and I couldn't tell why. So make sure that you keep your budget updated, that you're watching it closely, and if you slip up, it's okay. Just make sure that you're careful with it and that you're not constantly slipping up, because the worst thing you can do is think you have more money than you actually do and then run into the point where you run out. So with this, we're going to be moving into our discussion more about traveling while in university, because that's a bit easier to talk about than budgeting and really relies on your ability to budget in the first place, so we needed this first. So we'll move on to there now. So, now we're going to move into our discussion about traveling while you're in university. Now, traveling in university is a very difficult but a very necessary thing. Many people come from outside of town, outside of the city, the region, the province/state, the country even, and there are points where they want to go back home. They want to see their friends, or maybe they want to go explore Europe if you're one of those students. But even so, a lot of people get the desire to see more than their university when in university. Excuse my overusage of the word. And that makes full sense. When you're in school, just past high school, you're finally independent, you finally have a budget of your own, and you can finally start doing things. You're old enough to drink, usually, or to smoke, if that's your fancy. Not personally mine, I have asthma, but even so, you're free to go on explorations. You're free to use your ID and drive and meet up with your friends and just go doing whatever you want. And it's a unique, amazing freedom, and the best time to explore it is when you're in university. This is the time where you're most free, when you're at your youngest, you have your most energy and your most ambition, and everything amazes you and brings a new light to your world. So travel while you're in university. This is the objective best time to do it. But this doesn't mean that it's something that you're entitled to or something that you can just do easily. It takes a lot of work to be able to travel and not have to deal with any backlash due to it after. And that work takes preparation. We've already talked about keeping a budget and how if you plan your budget right, there will always be money going into your savings. And this is most important when we talk about traveling. A lot of people save up money specifically so they can either travel, so they can buy a house, buy a car, something of the sort. But the most common that I see, especially in university, is to travel, to go somewhere that they wanted to go since they were a kid, but they couldn't because either their family was poor, or there just was no chance to, or maybe their parents didn't like the idea. Whatever it was. A lot of people I know make that their big thing in university, besides buying a lot of clothes and food. But even so, a lot of people really can't afford it, and I've definitely heard plenty of horror stories about this. My girlfriend even told me about one guy she knew who, out of high school, got a credit card and a loan from their parents, from what I can tell, and went to Europe on it, and from what I can tell, they are still paying this off, and that was quite a while ago now, almost a year. Like, that ruins your life. Simply as that. If you can't keep a budget and have a balanced job before you do such a thing, you're going to ruin your life, or I guess that's a bit harsh to say, but you're going to mess yourself up and be dealing with it for a long time. And that's the importance and the beauty of a budget and the downfalls of not having one. The risk you pose of spending more money than you have. Now, I understand most people, especially if you're listening to a podcast like this and care enough to go this far into a podcast like this, are never going to make a decision that bad. That was easily the worst decision I have heard in a long time. But even so, it shows an example of what does happen when you're not careful with your money. As a general rule, always make sure you have enough money for whatever you want, plus be about 25%, maybe even 50% if you want to be super careful. 25% do. That 25% covers all the possible things that could go wrong, and there are a lot. But either way, when it comes to traveling when you're in university, the first thing you need to do is, well, pick a destination. I know, it feels like I'm jumping the gun, but it's actually really important because where you choose to go is kind of going to choose your price. So, for an example, let's say you're a student from, I think it's the Western United States, Western Canada, and you've always wanted to go to Japan. Like, it's a beautiful place, very unique culture, very different, a mix of many religions, a mix of many ideologies. It's a very nice place to go. A lot of technology, the world's largest megacity, many reasons to go there. That's not the scope of this episode. But in that situation, you have a very different travel cost than maybe going from Vancouver to Seattle, which you could probably do in a drive in under a day, maybe two. So they're very different. So let's say you made the choice. You're in British Columbia, maybe California, maybe Washington. That's the other state that's on the border. And you want to go to Japan. Well, the first thing you need to do from there is get an approximate price for planes, flights, and hotels at the time of your trip. Let's say you want to go on a trip over Easter break. Great. Look up flight costs on Easter break or flight costs on the last Easter break. I would go to the last Easter break because that's a little bit easier to find the numbers for if you're quite far off. But even so, looking at either one should probably get you the answer. If one doesn't, look at the other. Keep looking up around the time period. If you can't get on Easter break, look a week before or a week after. Which those numbers will be pretty different because Easter break is a very popular time, but even so, it's the time to look at. So, let's say you looked at your planes and you looked at your hotel for like say you wanted to stay a full week, 6 nights. Let's say you want to stay 6 nights, then check a hotel booking, multiply it by 6, add on another 2 days just to be careful. For your flight, add on, I'd say another ticket's worth. So if you have 4 flights total, plan for 5. Now, planning for 6 might be a little bit better, but if you plan for 5, you probably will still have your grounds covered, because if the airline's messed up, oh, that's their fault, not yours, right? Then you need to look at what would you want to do in your destination. Maybe in your destination you wanted to, I don't know, let's say if you're going to Japan, you wanted to see the city of Kyoto, Osaka, and Tokyo, which means you have to look at taxi costs, and you need to look at costs of hotels in each individual location instead. And let's say there's a few attractions you want to go. Now, I personally don't know a lot of attractions in Japan. I just know a lot of the small stores that people love. So let's say you just wanted to go on a shopping spree across 3 cities in Japan. That's a completely random reason to go, but you know what? I can perfectly reason going to Japan to solely go shopping in local stores. That sounds like a dream. But moving on from that, let's say that was your plan. Well, you need to have an idea of how much you want to buy. Let's say in an ideal world you wanted to spend $500 in these stores. That's actually like a relatively high amount, and that can get you a good amount of stuff. Now, for a week-long trip, I would budget a little bit more to that, but even so, that's a good way to start. So, budget $700. I know it sounds a little bit sudden, a bit harsh, and that's 40%, but even so, you go over your $500 just in case you need to spend the extra money, or there's something else you wanted to see or you wanted to buy. In that case, then you have enough money to handle a larger purchase. So now you have the idea of what you want to do. Let's say the 4 other days you planned yourself, you checked the money for, you got it written down. Take all those numbers, add them together. Now, you should have an approximate value for the cost of your entire trip, actually. And then you can use that value to create your budget. Now, you might want to add a little bit more onto that. With the amount of money that we've already said you should add on, you could add just another 10% to it just to have a final let's be careful number, but that's not fully necessary. And then you now have the money budgeted. So now look at how much money you do have, or how much money you will have at the time of the payments, and make sure that you'll have enough. Maybe adjust your budget. Maybe you decided, let's say you had that $150 a month that I discussed in the previous section, and now you decided that you're going to lower that down to $100 a month because you want to take that $50 and save it up for your trip. And let's say your trip was a trip of this caliber. Let's say you had to pay $2,500. That actually sounds quite reasonable. Maybe the flights are cheaper than I think, but $2,500 budgeted. So you're going to take $50 a month for 10 months. You're planning this very, very far in advance. Well, that's already $500 saved, meaning you have $2,000 left to look at. Maybe you'll have a job over the summer that will make you $10,000, and you can actually $10,000. Let's say that you got a good job, you're working with a co-op program, you get $15,000. So let's say $10,000 to go to university. That's another $5,000. That's like $5,000 go towards a trip. That's a lot of money. So let's say $10,000 goes to university, another $3,000 needs to go towards other expenses. There's your other $2,000. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. There's probably going to be a lot of other stuff you have to buy throughout the year, and probably a lot of other ways you're going to have to take money in. But in this case, you now have $2,500. So go into your budget we discussed earlier, block that $2,500 off solely for this trip, and when you feel that you're ready, start booking your flights, book your hotel. Do it as soon in advance as you can when you feel confident in it, because then you get the cheaper prices, and the cheaper prices are very nice because guess what? That's more money for the stores that you wanted to visit, or the attractions you wanted to see, or maybe for another trip in the future. And then make sure that you have looked up your country, because even though we've discussed all the budgeting aspects, there's a lot more to traveling. Make sure you look up your country. Make sure you look up its laws, its practices, its culture, and how to respect it. Do not go to another country without respecting their culture. You're going to be a Class A asshole on this trip, to put it as crudely as one can. And not to mention, you're risking locals in the country treating you poorly and getting angry at you, which is going to make it for a terrible holiday. So make sure you respect the culture. Make sure you understand the pricing that you have to go there. Make sure that you've converted your money over. Talk to your bank for that. If you know the country you're going to uses a different currency than your own, which unless you're in the European Union, it does, make sure you convert money over to that currency so you have money to spend while you're there. The worst thing you can do is go to Japan with the US currency and not be able to spend it. And you're not going to be able to. They use the Japanese yen, I think it is. So make sure you convert your currency over. Talk to your bank for that. Do that well in advance. The sooner in advance you do it, the better. Make sure that you have an understanding of, or make sure you have an idea for emergencies. Who can you call? Who can you talk to? Is there anyone nearby? Who are the police? Such like that. Make sure you have all the phone numbers written down. And there's much more that you'll also have to make sure that you know. Many other things. And make sure you look at other attractions you might want to visit when traveling. It's a very important time, and it's a time when you can do a lot of stuff that you might never get to experience again, right? Maybe there's a once-in-a-lifetime event going on that you really want to see. Great, go see it. Budget for it. Make sure you can get the money, and start looking up the other things you can do, and what's expected of you there. If you're going to a country that has maybe not your native language there, what stuff can you learn in their language before you go to make your life easier? My best recommendations are hello, goodbye, I don't speak X language, I want this, and where's the bathroom? Or where is location, right? Those are some of the most important things to know, and probably what you'll use the most in another country. You might also want to know, bring me to this place, and thank you, which in Japanese I think is arigato. So sticking on the Japanese idea, it's actually a really good country to visit as of right now, so I fully recommend doing so. But that's not my grounds to say where to visit. You might have your eyes on a nice European country for all I know, or maybe you feel like going to Africa. There's many great countries to go to, and honestly, that choice is up to you. But make sure you understand what to expect of that country. It's also good to make sure that you get your vaccinations on. I know for some people that's a pretty controversial topic, but yeah, get your vaccinations. Get your flu shots. Make sure you're not going to contract measles or polio when you're in another country. Now, I know polio's been eradicated. It's just an example. Don't get on me for that one. But make sure that you're prepared for it. Look up what illnesses you could get in another country and how to protect against them. Look up the native animal population if you're going to be going around the forest or jungles more often, because there's animals that can be very deadly that you have to look into. Make sure if you're going on tours that you actually book tours and tour guides. Basically, look at what you want to do in advance and think, what could go wrong? And then take every single thing that could go wrong, write it down, and write at least 2 solutions to it, and have that on you when you go to the other country and already planned. Maybe you get robbed. Well, insurance is a good thing to have. Travel insurance. You're going to want that. Maybe your country has universal health care. That country doesn't. You're going to want travel insurance for health care as well then. Now, that's a little bit more expensive. You're going to need to budget it. And if you're super careful, sure, maybe you won't need it. I've never used travel insurance myself, but I've only gone outside of this country when I was 7 years old. So I can't speak much on that front. If you go into another country that's a different healthcare system, yes, get health insurance for while you're there. That could save you millions of dollars. Thankfully, most countries are pretty compliant with like healthcare standards if you're just careful and have your insurance with you. So there's going to be no issues there, right? And as I said, look at everything that can go wrong and just tell yourself or ask yourself, okay, how will I deal with this if it does go wrong? Write it down, and if it's something that you have to do in advance, prepare for it in advance. Maybe you get robbed while you're there, okay? What are the numbers for the police? What are some backup items I can bring but leave in my hotel? Etc. Maybe you could lose your identification. All right, how do I get a second copy? How do I get another identification that would work in lieu of this one? Like, for example, if you lost your passport. Well, most countries do have their passports also available in a database that in emergencies can be accessed. As far as I know, don't quote me on that one, look it up yourself, but if you're to lose your passport, maybe they'll take your driver's license and they'll get permission to use that one. Well, set that up when you can to make sure that in a worst case scenario, you can make it home, that they know who you are. Maybe you lost your tickets, make a backup. Most airlines actually will email you your tickets now instead of just having paper copies. Keep that email, put it on your phone as a PDF, just download it to your phone, and make sure you can get it out when you need it. Maybe you lost your ticket, maybe it fell out of your bag. Oh, well, it's on your phone, just show them your phone. Boom. It's a very simple thing to do, and it's gonna save you a lot. And that's about it. Once you have looked at the prices for everything and looked at the times you want to go, made a budget, paid for your airlines, booked your hotel, and have thought of everything that could go wrong, go enjoy the country you wanted to go to. Go enjoy your events and all the attractions. If you need to buy tickets, buy your tickets, and make sure you do that months in advance. These things sell fast when you start getting near the due date. Do it early. Don't expect to just go to Britain and then see a live concert of Maroon 5 or whoever's playing there if you didn't buy a ticket 3 months in advance. You're not going to get in at the door without paying a ludicrously high amount of money. But that's besides the point, and probably a little bit extra to go into. I'm not speaking from experience there, I should mention. That's not my favorite band. Either way, once you have looked at everything, well, you're ready to go to your country, and you can enjoy. And you're in university. Enjoy. Do whatever you can. Go eat the most random food you can imagine. The food that sounds like it's going to disgust you the most. You might find a new favorite. Or you might get a little ill for a few hours. But you're young. It's not going to hurt you. Get a little ill. Go enjoy that random food that you never thought you would like. And enjoy the country you're in. Embrace it. Take the time to learn the culture and Like, learn the language if you want, and enjoy what you're doing, and enjoy doing what you love. That's the most important thing about traveling now. A lot of people, it's a business. A lot of people treat it as a business. But even so, it's your chance to go to do other things you wouldn't be able to do at home and enjoy them and love them. Make lifelong memories, make lifelong friends. Maybe fall in love while you're out there. I know that's such an idealized tale that everyone talks about, but it's a possibility. And yeah, it actually happened to me, so I can say that that does actually happen. Now, I wasn't traveling outside of the country, but that is very much happened to me. My girlfriend's actually watching me record this podcast and is smiling at me while I say this. So, yeah, like, it can happen. Who knows? So go enjoy, embrace it. And if you're going to a place that you're a bit reluctant to, do your best to enjoy it. Don't sit back and think, I'm going to hate this. I don't want to do this. Say, you know what? I didn't want to do this, but I'm going to do what I can to enjoy it. Trust me, it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of worry. And that's actually about everything I have to say. When it comes to budgeting, obviously it's important. When it comes to traveling, it too is something important, enjoyable, and amazing you can do in university. Don't pass up the chance to go explore the world while you're still young enough to do so. I know even I need to do a bit more exploration before I get too old. So, with that, we're going to move on to the outro and end the episode for today. So, we come to the end of the 6th episode of Unicast, the University Podcast. I know this episode is a long time coming. I'm about a month late with this one. I really hope this has not bothered too many people. If I get a lot of people watching this, this is probably already after I've ended the series, so hopefully this is not too bad of a thing. Even so, we're finally back on track. They're going to be coming every 2 weeks, and you can expect many nice episodes. If you've made it this long to the ending, thank you. I don't expect anyone to make it here. If you hear this, I don't know, leave a comment and say hey or whatever. Anyway, this week we discussed budgeting and traveling while you're in university. And next week we're actually going to be talking about discussing your major. This is the topic, or not discussing, choosing your major. This is the topic I have been very excited to discuss since I started the series as a whole. So keep tuned for that. That's actually going to be the best one, I think, yet. Anyway, I've been your host, Flux. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're from YouTube, and recommend the show to friends, family, or anyone else you may want. It actually helps a lot more than you can imagine, especially after taking a month-long delay. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.